Welcome. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Ryan Donahue. I am the Advocacy and Policy Director at Habitat for Humanity, Seattle, King, and Kittitas County. Let me go ahead and hand it off to our amazing moderator today, Ross Reynolds, the Executive Producer of Community Engagement over at KUOW. Take it away, Ross.
Well, we'll see how amazing it is. Thanks to all of you for joining Habitat for Humanity, Seattle, King County for this virtual discussion. As we just heard, I am the Executive Producer of Community Engagement at KUOW, and we're here to talk about housing affordability in our region, and particularly how that affects low and moderate income families. We're going to hear from 3 local mayors about how this issue is playing out in their cities, how they have addressed or plan to address the housing deficit, as well as what support they would like from the upcoming legislative session. So to start, let me introduce our esteemed panel of mayors. Lynne Robinson, the mayor of the city of Bellevue, Nancy Backus, mayor of the city of Auburn, and Angela Birney, mayor of the city of Redmond. And thank you so much for taking time out from your busy days to join us this evening. Thank you so much. For those of you who are watching and listening, we'll be taking your questions later in the hour. So drop your comments and questions into the chat box as we go along. Ryan Donahue will answer them if he can and pass them along to the mayors if he can't. And in the interest of time, so we don't get so we can get to all of our questions and audience questions, I'm asking the mayors to please take only up to 2.5 minutes to answer each question. But of course, if you can answer more concisely, please do so. So to start off, I'd like to get each of you to briefly address this question. Is there a housing affordability crisis in your city? And if so, how does it compare to other issues facing your city? What are the specific challenges with housing affordability that your city faces? And what steps are you trying to solve them? Lynne Robinson, you want to take a swing at that?
Yeah, I think I should. I think Bellevue is ranked one of the worst in affordable housing in their city. And I just want to tell you what an honor it is to be here with Mayor Birney and Mayor Backus, who are both elected to be their mayors. I was selected by my council to be mayor. It's a very different job. And so I'm honored to be here with them. And Ryan, I'm a huge fan of Habitat for Humanity. So thank you for having me. Yeah, I mean, we do have a large affordable housing problem in Bellevue, and it's growing every day. With every new job that comes somebody who probably can't afford to live here. And so that affects our environment. You have more people commuting. It affects the quality of life. You have people spending more time in their cars than they can with their family. It's not good equity. And I love this because you can look at it both ways. It's not equitable for the people who are not able to live near where they work, and they're not able to build equity in their homes. And so that's a huge hit on their secure future. So we, since 2017, we implemented an affordable housing plan. And I regrettably took a long time to implement, but we finally implemented it. We haven't fully implemented, but almost fully have, and we're starting to see the benefits of that. So we have incentives for affordable housing. We are retaining affordable housing. We're working with our large employers to help create retention of workforce housing. We are doing zoning changes, land use code, a comp plan, everything we can to hit this at every angle so that we can have more people who work in Bellevue live in Bellevue. Currently, pre-COVID, only 10% of the people who worked in Bellevue lived in Bellevue. So that's a huge tidal wave of individuals coming in and out every day. And in terms of community building, these are people we live with every weekday, but we don't get to live with them on the weekends. And so we're missing out on a big part of our community. So we have since, just in the last 2 years, met the goal of creating 1,000 affordable units, permanent units a year for the last 2 years, which I'm really proud of. We have a lot more in the pipeline, but we have a lot more work to do because with every high paid worker that comes into our city, they estimate about 4 lower paid individuals will come in as well to support them. So it's very important to me that not only we create this housing in the full spectrum to accommodate all the people who work in our city, but I'm also very interested in seeing how we can pay a base minimum living wage to everybody who works in this area.
Great. Let's turn to you down in Auburn, Nancy Backus. I wonder if you could take a swing at that question. Is there a housing affordability crisis in your city? And cities have lots of problems. How does housing affordability compare to some of the other issues you're facing? What specific challenges are there to affordable housing in Auburn? And what steps are you taking to try to solve them?
Yes, thank you, Ross. And I echo Mayor Robinson's a privilege of being here on this panel with two female mayors that I admire very much, and also you and your work, and of course Habitat for Humanity. But a year ago, we might have had a very different answer to this question, and it would have been a challenge for the Eastside, but not for South King County. But the affordability crisis has shifted Auburn from a traditionally affordable community to one that's no longer really accessible or available to a segment of the population. And while we have some affordable housing inventory in the targets at the 60% AMI, and we have some older, modest single-family homes that provide a less expensive model of ownership option, we've seen that all new construction is way off the charts, and it's no longer affordable, right? There is no such thing as affordable new homes, even in South King County. It's out of reach for many, and many of the older rental properties are increasingly expensive as the properties are sold, and that crisis is leaving a very large percentage of our community behind, and losing a large stock of that historically affordable housing and rental properties as people cash out for their retirements, or simply no longer want to be involved, or they see that the market has become such that their retirement is closer and in reach because they can sell those properties. The new owners have to be able to recoup their investment, and so the rents are going up. So it's a crisis in South King County as well. And we are looking at our comp plan similar to Bellevue. We have a housing plan. We are looking at our zoning. We are working with master builders on affordability as well, and looking for ways to be creative on how do we preserve housing stock, affordable housing stock.
Let's take the conversation over to Redmond, where Angela Birney, the mayor, is also with us. Angela Birney, talk about the housing affordability crisis in your city. And first of all, would you call it a crisis? How does it compare to other issues you're facing? What are the specific challenges of affordable housing that face you in Redmond, and what steps are you trying to do to solve them?
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I concur with the gratitude to be here today. Once again, working with Mayor Robinson and Mayor Backus. I have the privilege of working with them often, but also thank you, Habitat, for having us here today. So yeah, Redmond is a very expensive place to live. Currently, about 27% of all our households are cost burdened, which means they're really spending far more on housing than they should be compared to what they're bringing in. And they're mostly the elderly, young adults under the age of 24, and low income renters. And the income level is tied, like I said, is strongly tied to cost burden. In fact, those earning 30% of the AMI, or area median income, or lower, are more likely to be severely cost burdened. It's really hard to find something on the low level of affordability in Redmond. And they're either severely cost burdened or just cost burdened. And we know that this is a crisis in our community. We can see that as you go around, as restaurants have continued to reopen from the shutdown of COVID, and people are wanting to go out safely in their communities. A lot of restaurants and a lot of places that pay decent wages, but not quite enough to live in the city of Redmond, are really having a hard time finding those employees. As Mayor Robinson mentioned, for every tech worker that lives in the city of Redmond, there's other workers that we would like to have here to support that. And our businesses are having a hard time finding people. I don't think that someone wants to commute for an extremely long commute just to work a job necessarily in Redmond, when they might be able to find it in an area that's a little closer to home. So those are some of the issues we're definitely looking at right now. And so we're doing a few different few different things now and in the future. We're looking at upzoning in our areas of, for instance, Overlake, where 2 light rail stations are going in the next few years. We're looking at upzone that area, creating more housing so more people can have the opportunity to live there. We have inclusionary zoning in our city. So at 10% of the units have to be at 80% AMI. But we also have an MFTE, multifamily tax exemption program that people use. And then we also work with a lot of other organizations in our area. Imagine Housing and the Together Center are 2 examples of opportunities that we have to create financing for them or help them create the financing to create very affordable units within our city so that people can afford to live here. And we're trying to remove barriers on multiplex housing in areas that are historically developed as single family and to increase the inventory across the city. We also work with Arch and through the Housing Trust Fund to fund local projects throughout the Eastside, not just in Redmond, but throughout the area that provide housing at the lowest level as well. And then we also are participating in the Health Through Housing program that King County has started to provide housing for those that are either experiencing homelessness or are at the edge of being homeless. And so we, like all these other cities, are looking at any opportunity we can to increase affordable housing at the lowest levels, at the medium levels and at the lowest levels in our areas as much as possible so that people can live in the cities where they work.
So it's complicated.
Very complicated.
From all 3 of your answers. So I'm going to try to focus it in a way. If the housing crisis is not going to be solved overnight, but if you had the ability to solve one part of the affordability crisis in your city, what would you solve and how would you do it? And we're going to want to start this time with Nancy Backus. Just one part of this problem that you could solve, how would you do it and what would it be? Nancy?
It's one of the areas that we've focused on for quite a while and has been part of our legislative priorities. It is finding funding to preserve affordable housing stock that we currently have. New housing is always going to be necessary to meet the growing needs of population increases, but we need to better protect that established and existing housing portfolio and incentivize reinvestment in these properties. So the problem right now is either some of this affordable housing stock is old in South King County because 50, 60 years ago, all of the affordable housing, or at that time called low income housing, was kind of pushed south. And so that housing stock is old and it needs to be refreshed. It needs to be provided with the updates that are necessary to make it healthy, affordable housing. And sans the funding for the individuals to do that, they're either going to increase the rents on their properties in order to do those needed updates, or they're going to continue the rents as they are, and those properties will continue to deteriorate, and that's not healthy for the individuals who are the tenants or for the community as a whole. So that would be the area where we would like to focus our attention, is on funding for existing housing stock.
And Mayor Robinson in Bellevue, if you had to focus it down to one part of this complex question in your city, what would that one thing be that you'd try to solve? And do you know how you would solve it? Would it be the same thing? Would it be preserving affordable housing that's already there or something else?
Ross, I'm a politician, so I'm going to squeeze 2 into this answer. First of all, we need to have $300 a month units. Most of our homeless people could afford $300 a month. And so we have got to create that bottom end of the spectrum, and we need the full spectrum of housing. Currently only 20% of our housing is affordable to somebody earning 80% or higher area median income. So that means what I'm trying to say is 20% of the housing is not affordable to people earning less than 80%, and that's ridiculous. But the one thing that I want to throw out there that we don't think about enough is housing circulation. So we have more than 60% of our single family homes occupied by 1 or 2 adults, no children. And I'm venturing to guess that a lot of those people are empty nesters. So we don't have the opportunity for people to downsize in their community. and stay connected to their community and not spend their entire nest egg in doing that, because right now mortgages are much lower for those people than new rents or a new mortgage payment. So I think we really need to focus on how we increase the housing circulation, provide opportunity for people in our neighborhoods to downsize into an active senior community that helps them stay connected to their neighborhood. And that's a missing part of affordable housing conversation, I think.
And let's turn next to you, Angela Birney, in Redmond. What needed to focus it down to one part of this complex puzzle that you could solve? What would it be, and how would you go about solving it?
Well, one reason I like this question is because I can say that the other two, we didn't talk before, but we each have different ideas. And to be honest, it is a complicated problem, and all of these things are needed to help get us where we need to be. But one of the things I found in working with our organization called the Together Center is putting together the funding package for some of these low-income projects is extremely complicated and expensive. You actually have to have certain expertise in those areas in order to make it all work. And so my one ask, my one wish would be that the entities that provide the funding, be it federal, state, local, county, whatever it might be, nonprofits, is we find some way to make those funding packages work better together so that entities are spending less time on making the package work and more time and more money spent on actually creating the housing that's needed. That is my huge wish for all of us to work better together in that way.
You know, we throw out the term affordable housing, but I'm not sure we all understand it the same way. It's often used as shorthand for affordable rental housing or permanent supportive housing or even shelters. But an effective plan, at least according to Habitat for Humanity, must include affordable home ownership as part of an affordable housing mix. I mean, home ownership is the way people begin to accumulate wealth. It's a great divider within our country. So what that Habitat for Humanity is doing that, trying to provide home ownership for hardworking people and with gainful employment. And home ownership for them is sometimes just out of reach. They're able to build equity when they own a home, and the community receives permanently affordable homes. And people who are in their homes, we know, have a better attachment to their communities. They vote more, they're more involved in it. So I guess my question is, how do you see affordable home ownership playing into your city's plan to build and provide more affordable housing, home ownership itself? And we'll start with you, Angela Birney.
Well, thank you. I think some of it goes to Mayor Robinson's point about having a different variety of housing within our communities. I think long ago, I think about the amazing projects Habitat for Humanity has done in different areas of the country where the land wasn't expensive. And so it was a lot easier to provide those opportunities for people to help build their own homes and stay in them. But that's just not what we're facing here. Land in all of our areas are extremely expensive. Auburn, to Nancy's point, is becoming less affordable even down south. So I think the opportunities to create condominiums and townhomes and cottages and things like that need to be a part of our spectrum of homes that we're offering for people to actually own. I think the condominium reform law reforms that the legislature worked on was a good start, but I think there needs to be some more opportunities there. I think the funding mechanisms for those projects also need to be really on our forefront, because if we can keep people stable in their homes that they own, then they actually have control over that opportunity to create the finances within their lives to create that stability. And I think that has to be part of our calculus as we look forward as well.
And Lynne Robinson, how does home ownership, affordable home ownership, play into your plans in Bellevue?
It's a real vital part of it. About 15 years ago, we were doing a very good job of mandating 80% area median income affordable condominiums with every condominium development. And then the liability increased and condos just stopped being built. And we lost that opportunity. It's very hard to create affordable home ownership opportunities. And that's why we are such fans of Habitat for Humanity, because they find a way to make that possible. I'm really excited about the rezoning of the C1 properties, the church properties. We just doubled density on every single church property in Bellevue last night. And then we're going to go back and look at increasing the density further in all the multifamily areas or commercial areas or TOD areas, transit-oriented development areas. So we have a great opportunity to partner further with organizations like Habitat for Humanity to create ownership opportunities. And, to see the value of that, just think about who we're serving. We're serving our teachers, our first responders, our service industry, our new families, our kids coming back from graduating from college with their first jobs. I mean, these, these are all the people we want to be living with. So it is worth it to all of us to work really hard to make this happen.
And Nancy, Backus in Auburn, how does affordable home ownership fit into your plans for dealing with the housing crisis where you are?
Well, it's a critical component, Ross, and I will echo and agree with everything that Mayor Robinson and Mayor Birney have said. Condominiums, townhomes, duplexes, smaller housing, the accessory dwelling units, ADUs, someone who has a large piece of property being able to build in their backyard without all of the restrictions that for decades have been placed on those properties. We have also lobbied at the state level for changes in the laws for condominiums because that really is affordable entry-level home ownership. And our kids can't afford to buy a home right now, not even in Auburn. Like I said, if it's a new home, I'm not even sure I could afford a new home in Auburn or even afford the home that my husband and I bought 25 years ago. The costs have gone up so much, but it's a crucial element to ensure that we have stability within our community, right? As Mayor Robinson said, and Mayor Birney, you want people who are connected to the community, and if they have home ownership, it's a more stable and vibrant community. And we want to provide those opportunities. We recently adopted, our council did, a housing action plan that speaks more to the need for updates in zoning regulations, allow for more types of housing connected, right? Or in the same neighborhood, being able to have single family dwellings, duplexes, townhomes, that it's not just single family neighborhoods and multifamily neighborhoods, but that we are connecting them and finding that there's a vibrant reason to have neighborhoods that are more than one type of housing.
Well, that's a great lead into my next question. Many people are justifiably proud of their single family neighborhoods, and they are loath to accept changes. Is it a hard sell in Bellevue, for example, Mayor Robinson, to get citizens to accept duplexes and triplexes and condominiums in their neighborhood?
Yes, it's a very hard sell, but what's funny is that in place of that, what we're seeing are these adorable homes being mowed down and these monoliths being built on the lot, and everybody's just as upset about that. And suddenly 4 cute little cottages next to you looks really desirable compared to this thing that's casting large shadows on your yard. So I think it's time for a conversation to re-envision what our neighborhoods are going to look like, how we're going to accommodate people in their phases of life. As I said, the housing circulation, when people understand that concept, everybody really likes it. So how, maybe we start on the periphery of the neighborhoods. Maybe we start on those transition zones and allow townhouses and duplexes and triplexes. And then we start looking at, how we incorporate the accommodations that are needed to maintain the community as it evolves, whether that's detached dwelling units, accessory dwelling units, or attached ones, or rezone for triplexes, whatever. That's a conversation we need to have. And I will say that I would say the neighborhood is much more open to having that conversation now.
And Nancy, Backus in Auburn, what about in your town? Is it hard to get people in neighborhoods to accept changes that might involve other kinds of housing in that neighborhood?
It absolutely is. I think that's universal. For so long, we have put so much emphasis and value on single family units, right? That is what we all aspire to, is to own our own home with a patch of grass and no walls that we're sharing with someone else. And we really need to step back and reevaluate how we value these properties. We have a similar organization in South King County to ARCH. It's called South King Housing and Homeless Partners. And we've been established for almost 3 years now, and we're working on our own capital funds as ARCH has, we are in our infancy. ARCH is fully mature, but I was on a call welcoming our advisory committee the other day, and everybody was asked the question, when did you feel most at home? And the answers were very interesting. There are some people on the call that said, I feel most at home in an apartment or a condominium because I just want to be able to come and go as I please. I don't want to be tied down by taking care of a yard or painting or any of the other maintenance requirements with a single family unit. And we for so long have just placed a majority of the value on that type of housing that we have to rethink our priorities and understand that there is a new generation and a generation who is getting older, and I will add myself to that generation, that is going to be looking for housing options. And we need to provide it within our community so that people can be here their entire life if they want to be and not feel like they have to move elsewhere in order to have a different type of housing. But it is a challenge because we haven't changed that mindset yet fully.
A lot of people believe that today's housing policies, from permitting to zoning, have their roots in racial discrimination. And the long-running effects of those policies continue to disproportionately harm minorities. And for whoever wants to answer first, do you agree with that?
Well,
Yes.
I can go ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there are some really not great historical practices, I would say, in our region as far as housing goes with who could and could not own. I don't think you have to look too far. But I do think there's some small things that we can do and policy changes that we can make as jurisdictions. Right now, we're looking at our comprehensive plan coming up. And one of the things we're doing is we're taking an equity lens for the work that we're doing. And so we're starting to ask the questions, well, if we've always done it this way, why do we do it that way? Is that really the right way to do things? Is that really the right way that includes everyone in our community in the conversation? Is that really allowing people of all different walks of life to be part of our community? We pride Redmond as being a welcoming community. So what does that really mean is we're looking at our comprehensive plan and looking at our zoning changes or looking at all of that. What does it really mean? I think, we have the idealized American dream of owning a home, but does it always have to look exactly like we thought it looked like 30 years ago? What could owning your own home, to Mayor Backus's point? Some people, would love to own a condominium because that is exactly the right space and size and commitment that they want. Maybe they don't want a yard, maybe they don't want to have those encumbrances, but maybe we can look in different ways of how people can have that throughout our city. Maybe a townhome is the right answer, maybe a single family home is the right answer, but it just looks a little different now. But in the city of Redmond, we try really hard to provide a variety of different kinds of housing choices throughout the city. We do allow a lot of like ADUs are allowed throughout our city.
And ADUs are, for those,
accessory dwelling units, thank you, like a mother-in-law unit that's attached, that's the old school name for that. We allow a lot of those things to provide opportunities for people to kind of explore different ideas on creating housing in our community. But to go to the equity issue, it does exist, it is around here, and I think we just have to take a different look at it as we move forward in things and really be critical about the idea that, well, we've just always done it this way, and really ask the question, why, and is that the right way to do things moving forward?
and how about in Bellevue, Mayor Robinson, do you apply a racial equity lens when you look at some of the issues of planning and affordable housing?
Yes, I mean, as Mayor Birney just said, we too, during our council visioning process, put language in our council priorities that everything we do from here on out and every reexamination we do is with an equity lens. There's just no doubt that systems that we've had in place and have in place have affected generations of families and really held them back. And you look at the trajectory of families and their wealth and their equity attainment through the generations who have been held back by systems versus those who have not been held back. And it's just, it's horrible to look at and not recognize. You have to recognize that. And I don't know how we level the playing field at this point, but I will tell you that I was involved in, I know how to level it. I guess I don't know how to go back and compensate for the past, but I do know what to do today.
What?
We're working hard to do that. And I was part of the Greater Seattle Partners Committee that looked at our whole region during COVID and tried to come up with a plan for an economic recovery. And I was very pleased that the recommendation at the end of the day was to focus on more minority women and girls and do everything you can to get them training, education, support, and put them on the ladder to success so that they can achieve their goals and get a good salary. And that comes with childcare. Provide them the support that they need to have a full career, a successful career. And they said that the impact to our entire economy would be like a 35% increase to do that. So not only does it help us, it certainly helps them as well. And I'm really anxious to focus on that.
You're mayors of your city. You certainly have influence, and city governments can do a lot for a city, but that's not the whole story. There's also state government and there's also federal government. When it comes to all these needs we've talked about, where is it that you have the biggest deficit where you just have to go, we need something from Olympia, we need something from Washington, D.C. And I'll go back to you, Mayor Robinson in Bellevue.
Well, I would say, as Mayor Birney alluded to, we need more work on our condo liability laws. We really need to create more opportunities for home ownership. And that's the best way, I think, is through condos and townhouses. And so if we can address...
Could you explain why liability laws are an issue? What's behind that?
What happened, and this is going to be in layman's terms because I'm a layman in this, but what was happening is that when a developer built a condominium, they were responsible for the next 2 or 3 years for any flaw in the development. And even if it was just a minor thing, they would have to come back and replace all the doors or all the windows or all the facing on the buildings to such an extent that, and it may not even have needed all that. It's just the homeowners association would come back because it could. And it was good because it forced the condo developer to do a good job, but it got too burdensome. And so people just stopped building condominiums. So there's got to be a better law that holds developers accountable for quality development without making them be responsible for every single thing that happens to that building that's really not their fault for the next 3 years. That's what that looks like.
That's a great specific example. I want to go to Auburn and Mayor Backus. When you think about what you need and what your city can and can't do, maybe what do you look to the federal government to do that you're not able to do on your own?
Well, there is an endless amount of opportunities for partnership, and it's not just within the government level, it's with our philanthropic community as well, and then Arch and Skip, and even in Pierce County now we've developed SHAPE, South Sound Housing Affordability Partners, and since Auburn is in 2 counties, we are part of both organizations. But at the federal level, and probably people could say this about any level of government, but we've got to cut through the red tape. Sometimes the requirements and the restrictions on utilizing funding are so restrictive or so overwhelming that we just don't utilize the money, and it goes unspent, or it is spent somewhere where it's not really as needed as in some of our communities. It's really cutting through the red tape. And I think we are all guilty of that at every level of government. And I know in Auburn, we're looking at what we can do using that equity lens on our planning, on our zoning, how can we be more welcoming to everyone in our community and making everyone feel welcome, important, and vital to the success of the community? But we need less restrictions on how we accomplish these things. And quite frankly, sometimes it's getting rid of some of the unfunded mandates that we have been dealt at both the federal and the state level, so we can do what we know is the right thing for our own communities.
Tell me more. What unfunded mandates are you talking about?
Oh, goodness. We could be here all day, but it feels like every time there is a session, there is something else that comes up. There were some affordable, oh, help me, ladies, I'm drawing a blank right now, but at the federal level, at the state level.
I can think of one thing in the state level. An example is there were some really good improvements to zoning that came from the state. However, the mandates came at a cost to our cities, where our planning department would then have to do all of the work to put those things into place, because it doesn't just come from the state and it magically appears in city codes and ordinances. You actually have to go through the process to put it into place. Some of the mandates have required public hearings, which, I know it's a little details, but it adds up for cities. So it's some of these little things like that are really great ideas, but they come without the support of funding to implement them. And that's an example of from the last legislative session. Great work, wonderful things being put into place, but then we as a city, we as a jurisdiction have to put them into place, and that's time is money, and coming from our taxpayers, spending money on that.
Yeah. The intent is great, but it's the practical application at the local level that is causing the issues in numerous things, not just in affordable housing, but in policing and numerous other things as well.
It's a fine line between helping cities get beyond politics and just get the work done, and then mandating something that really isn't a good fit for that individual city, and then what Mayor Birney just referenced, how much it costs the city to implement that type of code. I would like to see, there's all these recommendations to exempt affordable housing development from fees, whether it's linkage fees or whatever kind of fees. And it'd be great if the state would help us, because we need those fees to put in the infrastructure to support the new housing. So it'd be great if the state would help us compensate for those lack of fees.
Right. And even in the building code updates, it takes a huge amount of time. Sometimes there are unrealistic deadlines placed upon municipalities to update that code, but it takes a significant amount of staff time and the implementation time. So there's just challenges, and all government is local. And I'm sure my fellow mayors here get it at the grocery store just like I do. That's my second office. And anything that is the responsibility of the federal or the state government all of a sudden becomes the responsibility of local government, and it's ours to fix.
We're going to get to your questions and comments in just a few moments. Ryan Donahue is looking through the chat things, and we'll have your opportunity to have some of those questions asked and answered. But let's focus back again on Olympia. We've touched on this a little bit, but I'm sure each of your offices is taking a look at the 2022 legislative session, kind of coming up with a wish list. And when it comes to this affordability issue and creating affordable home ownership, what's kind of at the top of your list that we haven't already talked about? We've talked about a few things. What are the things you'd like them to do in Olympia in the state legislative session to help deal with this? And why don't we begin with Lynne Robinson in Bellevue?
I'm sorry, I have to admit I was reading somebody's question. I didn't hear yours, I'm sorry.
Okay, what do you want from Olympia this session for specifically on this issue of housing affordability?
From Olympia, well, kind of what I just said. Help us with the supplementing the lack of fees if we exempt affordable housing development from them.
Angela, anything else on your list?
Yeah, I think that they did some great work with the Housing Trust Fund, but that money is always needed and always used. And if they could increase the Housing Trust Fund money, we would really appreciate it. And I think there's other opportunities with some streamlining of processes from the state level that we can roll down into the local level to make development a little less expensive, therefore creating more affordability opportunities. So anything like that, we're really interested in looking at.
And Mayor Backus in Auburn, what about your list of legislative priorities? What else would you like to see the legislature do to help you on these important issues of affordability?
Yeah, so I would agree with the fact that if we waive fees for an affordable project, we have to repay ourselves from our general fund. And so the ability to waive those fees would be very beneficial, as well as affordable housing to build is not affordable. Right. So when we had a wonderful example of support from the state government on inland development. They built 500 units of affordable housing, and they were on a deadline to be able to get the funding approved at the state level through Commerce. And it was a great example of us partnering with them to streamline the process to get them to the point where they could get the approval for the funding at the state level. But it's expensive to try and build affordable housing. We shouldn't be doing that to ourselves. But to Mayor Robinson's point, we need to be able to collect fees in order to provide the infrastructure as well. And some of the builders look to us and say, well, why don't you just waive all of your fees? We can't. We can't afford to waive everything. And there's school impact fees as well, which we are just a pass-through for. But there are fees that are required to be able to maintain the infrastructure that everyone expects a city to provide. So it's really a balancing act, and a very challenging balancing act for us.
A lot
Russ,
of
can I throw in something for federal and
Sure.
ask? You know, the HUD requirements for coordinated entry, their definition of that really needs to be reexamined. That says that, well, the county has their own interpretation of that, but when Bellevue, you know, creates affordable housing, and believe me, we have a lot of people in Bellevue who are cost burdened and paying way more than they can afford for rent just so they can get their kids in our school district. And we would love to move those people into this affordable housing so that they can save money at the end of the week or at the end of the month. But coordinated entry says that if you use county money, then you have to take people from all over the region and move them into our city as an opportunity, which I get, but a lot of people actually don't even want to come here. They don't have family or friends or community here, and they don't stay here very long because it doesn't work for them. They're connected where they are. And so the whole thrust of coordinated entry is to try to allow a child to stay in their school district and not to move them. And the county has reinterpreted that. And I would love to go back to coordinated entry definition and make sure it makes sense for the serving and the people in the community who need to be served.
We're going to get to some of your questions, but I've got one more for all of you. Land is a huge cost, and they're not making any more of it unless you're thinking of filling in a lake somewhere. And that's a huge driver and makes housing much less affordable. Is there any way that you as mayors can deal with just the price of land, which is the basic buy-in to even begin constructing housing? Any thoughts on that from any of the three of you?
We'll go back to my housing circulation.
Yeah.
Look at 60% of single family homes in Bellevue and think about if all those single family homes came on the market, what the cost of housing would be at that moment. So, I mean, making more things available to people, looking at our surplus property, looking at the school surplus properties, allowing development, maybe environmentally friendly development on wetlands, if that's possible. I mean, we really need to look at every single opportunity, including putting more homes in our neighborhoods, obviously. So that's what we need to do. And I think that's what a mayor can do, lead that conversation.
And Mayor Birney and Redmond, your ideas on just getting the price of land down to build on?
Yeah, and I think land is just extremely expensive, but Sound Transit has done this or is looking at this, putting transit-oriented development on some of their land that's adjacent to stations. They have mandated that. We're really excited about. The city of Redmond owns some parcels of property that we're looking at to working with development to redevelop into affordable housing as well. We have a couple of projects like that where we own the land in Redmond, but another entity rents it for, or has a fee where they use it, but they've put on, we have senior affordable housing that's just, you know, a block away from where I am right now, that also has a health clinic in it. And so there's a lot of really creative ways that you can use the land that cities and other entities own and use it in a development way to create the affordable housing that is needed in our communities, and putting them in, like, these pieces of property I'm talking about are in the core of our city. So they're in great locations, but we already own it. So the public already owns these lands. And I think we have to look experimentally and think about how we can use them to the best of our ability to create that affordability.
Mayor Backus, can you do that in Auburn, or are there other innovative ideas to try to secure land at a lower cost to lower the cost of housing?
So it's really challenging. You know, we can't really control the cost of the land. And I will tell you that there are no flat, easily buildable properties left in Auburn. The topography is such that we have to now get creative with how do you build on an incline? How do you build on a 10% grade? Or how do you allow for roads greater than what code currently says of 8 to 12%? Do you want to get to 15% grade in order to be able to build on those properties? What about landslides? What about access by first responders? There are no simple answers to this, right? It's very complex, very woven together. And while some people would say just, you know, cities buy the property and then give it to a nonprofit or someone to build on, it's just not as simple as that. I wish it were. If it were, we'd all be doing it already.
Sure.
Right?
Ross,
Yes.
excuse me. Yes, Mayor Backus, you're exactly right. And one thing our council has been talking about is, I call it a deed in lieu. So when a developer comes in to develop a piece of property, if they can't put affordable housing on it and they want that increased height, then we start them very low. So they definitely want increased height. They have the opportunity, and it's a first tier opportunity to do what's not a fee in lieu, where you pay into an affordable housing fund in lieu of developing the affordable housing, but you deed a piece of your property to a nonprofit and let them develop the affordable housing. And then that can be done in a much more affordable level than just asking the developer to sprinkle 5 units of 80% AMI into high-end housing. We could actually get 20 units of 60% or lower.
Remind us what AMI is. I'm on the ward.
Area median income.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I've got a lot more questions, but I'd really like to find out what Ryan Donahue has been seeing, and he's been looking at some of the chat that's been going on. Ryan, what are some questions we haven't asked yet that some people in the audience would like to hear answers to?
Awesome. Thank you so much. So a couple of questions. We've gotten a few questions about ADUs and DADUs, or accessory dwelling units and detached accessible dwelling units.
AKA mother-in-law apartments.
AKA mother-in-law apartments, yes. One of the questions, and we're kind of getting a lot of similar questions on that regards, asking about, is there ways that we can start to allow them to be built on people's properties, and ways to allow more to be built on people's properties as well? More than maybe just one, like 2 or something like that as well.
Yeah, how's that playing out in your cities? Anybody want to share?
I think it's critical that we start looking at that. And, you know, sometimes we have triggers for road improvements based on trips. And when you add ADUs to your property, that might trigger some improvements that need to be made because of those additional trips. And we need to look at, does that really make sense? A lot of our policies and our code made sense 20 years ago. And while I would like to say we're looking at every piece of it all the time, we're not, right? So it's always a constant process of reviewing the policies that we have in place. And that's one of the things that our housing action plan took into consideration, and we will be discussing with our council is what changes do we need to make to allow for more ADUs, to get people used to those as well? And what about the connection fees? You know, what are we doing to make those more beneficial and less expensive for our property owners who are willing to do that?
And I can add, in the city of Redmond, we allow ADUs. The opportunity to add more than one is an interesting thought. But one of the things I like to think about as we're talking about affordability is the whole complex of your affordable or unaffordable life. And one of those issues that has been raised is, do you have to own a car or not? Are you on a transit line? Are you near enough to transit that you don't have to have your own vehicle? When we talked earlier about allowing people to live near their jobs, part of that is so that they don't have to have the burden of that cost necessarily. And so as we look to create more density, be it in ADUs or townhomes or condos or whatever it might be for home ownership, I think we also need to calculate where is that in relationship to the transportation that's available for transit or light rail or community transit or whatever it might be, so that we're not creating, perpetuating the cost burden of those families and really helping people find a home and a place where they can really create a more affordable life with all of their encumbrances. And that's one of the areas that I really think we should be thoughtful about as we move forward in that. We have a lot of transit lines throughout all of our cities. And so I think it's really important that we allow people to have that opportunity to be, they want to live car-free, that they can live car-free.
Great. Mayor Robinson, do we want to take a swing at that?
Sure, we should have Kirkland's Mayor Sweet here because Kirkland's done a lot on this. Bellevue is probably the slowest. The council's talking about it right now, and it's interesting because at first it was suggested that we do it neighborhood by neighborhood as we do our neighborhood envisioning process. But some of our council members felt that it wouldn't really be fair to do it differently in each neighborhood, that we should just come up with a citywide approach, which obviously is going to take longer. So we're looking at examining that next year, I think, and looking at just a comprehensive codes that will allow ADUs, DDUs in a way that's going to work. You know, it's funny, Lake Hills is our oldest neighborhood with the oldest water pipes and sewage pipes. And just the thought of putting twice as many people on each lot just scares us because it's already failing. So you have to look at the big picture. How do we boost up the infrastructure to support the additional use of the utilities on each lot? So it's a worthwhile challenge.
Ryan, what else do people want to know about?
Awesome. I believe we have time for one more question from the audience, and I'm going to try and combine roughly 2 or 3 of the different questions that we've gotten into one. And that question is going to be about zoning in particular. There's a lot of questions about the idea of finding ways and changing zoning codes to allow for a more diverse set of options. One example being allowing for subdivision of lots, or sometimes what's called lot splitting, as an option to be able to allow for that. Also trying to make sure, particularly in areas, one person points out in downtown Redmond about the density there and saying that we need to drastically increase some of those areas. Where do you all as mayors stand when it comes to increasing density, and how do you believe that can best be done in your areas?
I guess for Bellevue, it's if you're talking about multifamily, increasing density for multifamily, our downtown's only 70% built out. We have Bell Red, we have Wilburton, we have Eastgate, we have Factoria. So we have a lot of areas we can focus, increase density and growth in before we go into our single family neighborhoods and put multifamily in there. But I'm very interested in increasing our home ownership opportunities. And so that's when I start looking at, what are the options for increasing, the amount of dwellings on these lots. And again, you have the infrastructure challenge, but I'm very interested in exploring the zoning of that.
How about in Auburn, Mayor Backus?
So we're always looking for opportunities for how we focus our growth and our density, and obviously with the growth management plan and through PSRC and others with our comp plans. And we have had to identify our growth areas, our density areas, and our downtown is one of our areas. And we have seen in the last probably 4 years, about 800 units. We've got a senior housing directly across the street from City Hall, that 20%, I saw somebody was asking about affordable. Why don't you require affordability in any of your projects? And they are doing 20% affordable senior housing in this project. And so we're trying to focus, and it is transit-oriented development as well. So we are trying to identify those areas where it makes the most sense, but also utilizing that equity toolkit and an equity lens to ensure that we are not marginalizing some of our BIPOC populations even more than they have been by saying, oh, this is a great area, let's do it here, without valuing what we're doing and valuing the neighborhoods that are already established. So it's not an easy, none of this is easy, but we are doing so thoughtfully and with the work of a DEI consultant and a lens and a toolkit to ensure that we are making the right choices.
Oh, I'm
and
sure it's
involving the community.
Redmond, right, Mayor Birney?
I'm sorry, Ross, what was that?
I'm sure it's very easy in Redmond.
Sure, yeah. As was mentioned earlier, if it was easy, we would all have done it by now. No, all of these are things we contemplate as we look toward increasing our density, increasing growth in our city. We have created density in our urban core in Overlake, is being built up right now, and in downtown Redmond, as well as one of our newer areas, Marymoor Village. And we have some of the fortunate areas. Some of those areas are ripe for redevelopment. It's been a while, but I think to one of the comments from the community, there are places in downtown Redmond where you could see more density could be an opportunity there, where it's still close to transit, it's still close to the downtown core. You could still walk or ride your bike, or not have to get in your car if you want to get somewhere. And I think those are all of the opportunities that we're looking at, as well as all of the other cities in the region as well are trying to be really thoughtful about where we put our increased density in our communities, so that we don't run into the issue that Bellevue might run into in, say, Lake Hills, where some of our infrastructure is getting old and really have to be cautious and thoughtful about what we do, in adding more burden, I guess would be the right term, onto that infrastructure. And we have, all of our cities have those same issues where we have to make sure we're balancing things properly.
Mayor Angela Birney of Redmond, Mayor Nancy Backus of Auburn, Mayor Lynne Robinson from Bellevue. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I learned a lot, and I think everybody listening learned a lot. And thanks for trying to deal with the local impact of this and come up with the creative solutions. Your willingness and to share your time and your passion and your expertise is kind of crucial to making this happen. So thank you very much. Also, thanks to all of you for listening and joining in, coming in with your questions and supporting Habitat for Humanity, Seattle King County's virtual speaker series. Habitat can't do its work without your investment of time or financial support, or both. Find out how to get involved. You can go to habitatsKC.org/get involved. So check that out. Thanks very much again for your time. Take care and be well.